Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Soberish Uprising of her own over 2 years ago, and everything in her life has changed. On the Soberish Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our own terms and making it our best power move. Today, I am joined by Allyson Roberts, founder of Unapologetic Power. Hello, Allyson.
Hi.
So good to see you this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yes, me too. To give a little background, you and I we've kind of somewhat run in the same coach, personal development, self-development circle. I know we have a lot of mutual friends, and so we're Facebook friends, and I have just been following your journey, these monthly updates of being sober, and you just hit a year.
I did.
So congratulations.
Thank you. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I love, this podcast is all about just telling our stories, right? So we'll just get into it. Like you and I discussed before we hit record, we don't know each other. We don't know really anything about each other's stories. So I'm super excited just to learn, like everybody else out there listening. So a year, October 22nd was your year anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what prompted this change to give up alcohol?
So the change actually happened or started happening 3 years ago. I love red wine. I was a huge wine connoisseur, and I woke up one morning and my eyes were swollen and I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. And I walked into my bathroom and I threw up. And I was like, I didn't have that much wine. Like, why am I hungover? What's going on with me? And then it was actually during the pandemic. And I walked into my kitchen. My adult daughter lives with me. And we had gone through 2 bottles of wine that night. And I was like, that's not good. Like, that's not good. And it was just her and me, it was just the 2 of us. But I was like, oh, it's a one-off, I'm fine. And so I really watched what I was drinking for 2 months, like a glass of wine. But it bothered me that I had to think about it. Like, it really bothered me that I had to think about it.
Yeah.
So right at the tail end of the pandemic, I ended up getting COVID. And so I went to see my doctor and she was talking to me and she's like, is there anything outside of COVID that you want to talk to me about before you go? And I was like, yeah, am I an alcoholic? And she was standing up and she sat down and she rolled her chair over to me and she was like, talk to me, what's going on? And I just said, so my drinking story is that when I was 13, I was in a horrifically bad place. Like, my parents had divorced 2 years before that, and my mom had basically forced me to get on the stand and lie and say that I wanted to live with her when I really wanted to live with my dad. And it was a whole thing. And so I just started drinking with high school friends because when I was going to high school, there was no middle school. Like, you went straight from elementary school to high school. So I was in school with 18-year-olds that could get alcohol. And we were all 13 hanging out with the seniors, getting drunk every weekend. And I mean, when I say drunk, I mean, like, I couldn't tell you what happened at some of those parties kind of drunk.
Yeah.
And then I had kind of a, come to Jesus, if you will, probably senior year of high school. I was like, probably don't want to live like this. And my dad that adopted me was also struggling with alcohol, and I would watch him and I'm like, I don't want to do this. So I gave it up for a really, really, really long time. And then the housing crash happened in 2007. And I went over to a girlfriend's house and she was like, we need to get drunk. And that started it. Like, it was like every weekend I would have a glass of wine while I was cooking dinner, a glass of wine after dinner, a glass of wine watching the movie. And then, that's almost a bottle. The way, especially in America, the way that we pours, like big, heavy pours. And so I was sharing all this with my physician, and she was like, well, can you stop? I mean, have you had like periods where you can stop? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, and how long do those last? And I was like, 2 months, And she was like, well, if you can go that long without having to, go into rehab or anything like that. She's like, I wouldn't say you're an alcoholic. I would say that you have a dependency on it. She's like, there's a difference, and so I was like, well, I don't want to be dependent on anything. Like I am so like independent. I was like, this is not going to work for me. And so, but even then, I left. Obviously I didn't drink while I was, in the throes of COVID. And I had long COVID, so that lasted like 4 months. And then I started drinking again. And then this, like the end of summer last year, I just started noticing that it was turning into, 1 glass into 2 and 2 into 3 and 3, and I remember waking up one morning and I really had only had a glass of wine the night before, and I felt like garbage. And I walked into my bathroom and I had to cancel an appointment with my dentist because I couldn't function. And I just sat down on my bathroom floor and I just started sobbing. And I think that I don't think it's a coincidence that sober and sob start with the same word, because I think that for me, alcohol was covering up like some really deep sadness around my family. And I just wasn't allowing myself to sob. And it was during that sobbing, like really deep, deep sob. Like I haven't cried like that in a really, really long time. And I just said, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to drink anymore. And I haven't even missed it. I mean, there are some times where I will feel like stressed out and, people live with me and there's alcohol in the house, because I'm not going to require people to not have alcohol. But I have to leave sometimes, just go on a drive, or I'll go on a walk, or, I'll ask them to just like take it to their rooms or something and, get it away from me. Because but it's not so much about, the emotion as it is just, I really don't want to break the promise to myself.
What promise is that?
Just that I'm going to stay sober. So
that original promise. Yeah.
So because I want to be in my feelings, I want to feel everything that's happening all the time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. That's a beautiful story. And what I heard too is like it came out of really traumatic events, right? A divorce, a housing crash, COVID. So it makes sense that that's like when that really escalated. And I know you're not alone, right? That's kind of when we all kind of start to reach for the drink a little more.
And society encourages it, right?
Oh my gosh. Yes. That's what we do. That's what we do when we're like stressed out. I mean, but I love that what you brought in about sob and sober, right? Like that word and how those come together. So like, are you more equipped now than a year ago to deal with emotions when they come up now that you're sober?
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know that I wasn't feeling.
Interesting.
I was processing everything up here in my head, and I'm really smart and I can figure things out. So that's what I would do. I would just use my brain and figure it out, and use my brain and figure it out. And I was just from here down did not exist, From here down was about playing tennis and building muscles and, but not, I mean, and it's crazy because like 3 months in to being sober, it's almost like not a nervous breakdown, but I was just like, I'm just feeling so much like, and I teach this. I mean, like, I'm a cognitive behavioral expert. I teach people to feel. That's what I do. Right.
Yes.
So, and I think that I was better at it at the time with other people than I was myself. It's kind of like the dentist that has rotten teeth or something. It's, but yes, I'm very equipped now. I mean, I check in every morning before I get out, and I used to do it too, but I was checking in here, and not checking in here. Like, is my heart hurting? What's going on, with my heart, with my soul? It's very different.
Yeah. Because our brain can override that, right?
Oh.
Like we're like, oh, that's it's not it's like something else is going on, or we can discount our, when we're talking, our bodies, our spirit, our energy, all of that. But our brain can be like, no, I don't think that's it. And when you remove that alcohol and that depressant, like then it like all bubbles up. And like you said, you're like, what is going on? I'm having all these feelings. And they had been there. They were just like suffocated with booze.
Yeah, and I just rationalized a lot of things, and it's so wild to me. Like even this morning when I was meditating, 18-year-old Allyson, just like she came out of the hippocampus, she came out of the subconscious and she comes into the frontal cortex and she's like, we got to deal with some things that are kind of and so I was like, you're right. And so I sat with her for an hour and just let her just get it out, and before, when I was drinking, when that stuff would happen, I would journal about it, but from here. It's just a totally, I don't know how else to say it. It's just a totally different feeling.
Yeah, that cerebral feeling it and processing, not like the spirit of Allyson processing it.
Yeah.
Well, I love you said that too. Like it's just getting it out, right? Because sob, we think of tears, which is like probably the definition of sob, but it can just be like the energy and just getting it out of our body, right? Which it equips you to do, is what I heard, is like that sitting there for an hour, as opposed to being like, I'm just going to journal it and fix it in my pen and paper, as opposed to like, no, I'm going to sit there and like see what happens.
Yeah. And it's changing my business too, because I've changed I used to use a more traditional thought model that really does involve like more brain work. And I've just come up with my own thought model that involves like the body and just like really like our behavior, like really examining that, because that is the tell-all. You can't, body doesn't lie, behavior doesn't lie. Like you have to look at it. You have to, because there's something going on.
Well, and you can't, when I think about when I was like more heavy drinking, and again, kind of like you said, was like 1-2 glasses a night. Sometimes, it wasn't like blackout drunk. It was anything, but it was like, I would wake up not feeling my best. Right. Like, so then it's like, okay, maybe I'm just hungover. You're like, or maybe you're having a reaction to something you don't want to do, but you don't know that because you're not connected to yourself because you're hungover. And so now it's like, I know, I'm like, ooh, this doesn't feel right. That it's not that I'm nauseous because I drink too much. It's because I'm checking in with myself, and you can't do that when you're drinking.
Exactly. And it's unfamiliar at first. Like when I stopped drinking and something would happen, my past behavior was, if it was after 5 o'clock, it's like, well, hold on, let me pour a glass of wine, and I'll process it with my wine in my hand. Right. And then like November, December, January last year, I was just like, holy hell. Like, I'm feeling something.
Yeah. And feels easier. Like, I'll just grab a glass of wine, but we know that that is just a split second helps, and then it comes
Just
back.
so scary. It's so unfamiliar to feel.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a great point. Because I think because we talk about and the good and the bad, right?
Yes,
Or not judgment, but they say like, you drink to get rid of the bad, but you're also numbing the good that comes out, right? So
hmm,
there's more joy in normal activities. It's like that dopamine hit. Um, but feeling just in general, you can't numb one without numbing the other.
exactly.
And I love you said, I in all my guests I talked to, I think every single person has been like, well, I realized I wanted to quit X amount of time. Like, nobody was like, it was that split decision. It was 3, 5, 10 years in the making. Like, what do you think? You said 3 years ago you had that moment during COVID of like, this probably isn't it. And then kind of a year ago, like, what was the biggest shift for you during that time?
From the 3 years to last year.
Yeah, like you kind of touched on it. But anything else to add? Because you had kind of said, 3 years ago, you're like, I'm probably drink. Like, if am I an alcoholic, right? And then it took a little
Yeah.
bit of time to actually that change. So, did it progressively get worse? Was it kind of a constant thought in your head, or what was it during? What did those 3 years look like? Sorry, that's a very long-winded question. But
No,
what did those
it's
three
great.
years look like for you as you kind of
So,
knew?
so I have a really complicated family story. I
Mm.
mean, I almost have to whiteboard it out for people. Be like this, and I mean, seriously, like I really do.
Yeah.
And I came, I finally just came to terms with a lot of truths in my family
Mhm.
instead of trying to make excuses for people, make excuses for events.
Yeah.
I was just giving a lot of rope. And a particular event happened that you and I do not have time for me to give you the whole
Mhm.
backstory, but a particular event happened that like it really crushed me. Like
Mhm.
it really hurt my feelings. And I was like, you know what? I I have to leave. It's gonna make me cry. Mhm. I was not expecting that.
Oh, take your time.
It's like if I want if I want a new reality, right? If I want a new future, I am going to have to say goodbye to
Mm.
this version of Allyson that is coping and managing and um, grasping.
Mm.
You know, I've got to become even more disciplined than I already am. I have to become even more connected to myself than I already am. I have to love myself even more than I already do. I have to wake up in the morning feeling really, really good from the
Mhm.
from the moment my eyes open, just feeling really good. And alcohol was um, providing a playground of shame. And you cannot have the life that I live now is just in a year is
Mm.
so different. It's so different, Holly, internally.
Mhm.
It's hard to even put into words how joyful I
Mhm.
feel every day. And she wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
um, she was struggling like that version of me. I was writing I was writing between two worlds, and I
Mm.
wasn't being truly authentic and honest to even what I coached to. I wasn't, um, I just wasn't being the fullness of myself. And it's because I was believing a lot of lies that were told to me when I was younger that I'll never amount to anything. Um, and, that I'm just like my dad or just like my mom or this and that. And my mom has her own issues. And so I was kind of holding on to, they're probably right. I mean, you act that way, you act that way, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just in a 48-hour period that it was just like a download. It just all just like came to me, and I was like, I can't, and I physically like hugged that old version of myself, and I said, "Oh my God, I love you so much, but you're not coming with me. It's not possible for you to come with me."
That's beautiful. Like you said, that two worlds, right? You can't be this version of yourself and accomplish this or do this that you want. But I love that thought of still showing yourself grace and compassion for that version of Allyson. She wasn't doing anything wrong, right? She was just doing the best she could.
She was doing the best she could
all
do.
of our versions of ourselves, right? Like we're all doing that, and the grace. And you talked about coping, managing, and grasping. I think probably people listen, and we've all been there at a point in our life. So thank you for sharing that, especially as you had said too, as a coach, right? Like you're in the middle of coaching, leading, doing that successfully, and also struggling in this space, which I think is so important that we talk about, because it's not always, it's people that look like they really, really have it together that could still be struggling with some type of alcohol. I don't want to say dependency or abuse, but just not doing what they want to be doing with their life.
Right. Exactly.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I also had really strong evidence that I could just put it down, because in my 20s, I was a 2.5 pack a day cigarette smoker.
Okay.
And I'd been smoking since I was like 6 years old, because my sister got me started. So it sounds like, oh, you just must have just started smoking. But no, I had been smoking for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And I was coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing. And I went to the emergency room, and they referred me out to a pulmonologist, and I met with him, and he was like, "Allyson, your lungs are like a 60-year-old man. Like you have to stop smoking. Like like he showed me the x-rays, and I was like, oh my God. And he's like, thankfully they can regenerate themselves.
Yeah.
But he's like, you have to stop smoking now. And I had just bought like a whole carton of Marlboro Lights, like cigarettes, and they were in my car, and I went outside and I took them and I just chunked them in the dumpster, and I have never ever touched a cigarette again. And that was like a long time ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so also in the bathroom, I was like, Allyson, you've got this.
Yeah.
Like, and you used to be a chain smoker and you just stopped cold. Like, you can do this. Like, you've got this. And it's amazing to me that it took me 3 years to actually stop. It says a lot about my pain. It says a lot about my struggle that I was going with behind the curtain,
Yeah. How do you handle your pain now that you don't have alcohol as a somewhat of a medication? I don't use the word medication for alcohol, but as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I love that question. Someone asked me the question the other day. Because she's still drinking, and she was like, well, what am I going to do if I put this down? And I was like, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I deal with it in all different kinds of ways, but the main thing that I do is I'm not afraid to have difficult conversations anymore. And so if I'm hurting, I just go to the person, and say, we need to work this out or not. I mean, and that's something that I wouldn't do when I was drinking. I would just pour a glass of wine and stew on it for, 97 years. I also, I'm running again. And I also just allow myself to just feel it. It's amazing how when you get really mad about something and you just allow yourself to just feel the anger, that the longer, I mean, for me, if I get really, really mad, it's because I'm scared,
Mhm.
and so if I
Yeah.
just allow myself to just process it, then I'll come into my fear, right? And then I'm in my fear, and then I'm like, wow, it's not even about that. That's so amazing. And then the longer I sit with that is,
Mhm.
wow, this is like, because when I was 8 years old, this thing happened, and
Yeah.
it's reminding me right now of when that thing was. And then I go to the 8-year-old and say, it's okay. Like, I've got you. What do you need? What do you need from me?
Yeah.
You know? And
Mm. Yeah.
she always tells me,
Mhm.
it's never a surprise to her. It's just a surprise to me that,
Mm.
you know,
She knows. Yeah.
yeah.
What I love, what you said too is like, um, it's like life still happens, right? Like my life didn't get perfect when I stopped drinking at the rate I was drinking, but like I am able to deal with every single thing that comes up much easier, right? Like you're like, is
Mhm.
it anger? I'm not going to act. I'm not going to have a couple glasses of wine and get mouthy. I'm going to think about it. And is it, as you said, is it fear? Is it sadness? Like I'm able to process like what is going on and allow myself to be mad or to cry or whatever that looks like. Um, and one thing too is what you mentioned, which I think is so fascinating. I think about this almost every day is, your friend is like, well, if I can't have drinking, what am I going to do to like cope? And it's like, or heal or mask the pain. And I'm like, if it worked, it would work. It doesn't work.
Right.
Right. It's like, if it worked, you would get past it and you wouldn't need it. Like, so
Exactly.
it's like finding like it never heals what we think it's going to heal.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. And she was just like, I mean, she was like, I'm not going to quit drinking wine. And I was like, well, I'm not, that's fine. That's your decision. Like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and she was like, are you mad at me? And I was like, I'm not mad at you. Why would I be mad at you? It's not, I'm not drinking the wine. You're drinking the wine. Like, go ahead and drink it.
Yeah. We're not
But
making me drink the wine.
I've also lost some friends in this
Mm.
process.
Tell me a little bit about that. What does that look like for you?
They just don't invite me anymore.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, but I just don't get invited. And it's been really interesting to just kind of sit back and watch, because
Mhm.
when the first couple of times that we would go to dinner, and they were like, what, why aren't you ordering wine? Like, what's going on with
Yeah.
you? It's like, I'm just taking a break, because at the time I didn't want to make any promises to myself or anybody else, because I had no idea
Right.
if it was going to last. I didn't know, right? I was just trying to get through like every single day.
Right.
And then after, a few months, one of my friends was just like, you make us uncomfortable.
Mm,
And I was just like, that's so interesting, you know? I mean, that's what I said to her. I was like, that's so interesting that I would make you uncomfortable. I mean, what does that say about what,
yeah.
your relationship with
Mhm.
wine? I mean, what does it say about it? And,
Yeah.
you know, and she was just like, yeah, well, I don't know what it says about it, but you just, if you're not going to drink, then, you probably shouldn't really come to dinner with us anymore. Um,
Mm.
and it just, and dating has also been a very,
Oh, okay.
very interesting.
Yeah. 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 So is that something you come forward with like soon on dates, or do you just kind of let it roll out how it needs to?
Well, when you go on a date, the very first thing they want to do is buy you a drink.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the last date I went on, I was like, oh, well, I don't drink. And the guy was like, this isn't going to work for me.
Mm,
And I was like, well, at least we know. And he was like,
yeah.
yeah,
It's not gonna work for me either if it's not gonna work for you.
yeah, he's like, I'm a big drinker. This is, he's like, this just isn't going to work for me. And I was like, that's fine. Um, so, but I was like, man, I wish we would have had a Zoom conversation before I drove like, 35 minutes each way and put the makeup on and whole thing.
Wasted a good hair day for like nothing. You're like, I could have done this at home.
And then I've run into the other extreme too, where, guys are like, well, you need to be in AA. I mean, if you're,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
because they're sober and they go to AA all the time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
actually, I don't, I'm good. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, it's
Yeah.
just a matter of time. And then I'll start getting, so it's just
Yeah.
very, very new and very bizarre
Interesting.
um,
Yeah.
journey to be on right now.
Is that surprising to you, the opinions that people would have about you surrounding not drinking?
Mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't think it mattered, right? I'm like, I'm not forcing you to do. You can do whatever you want to do.
Exactly. And I really do feel that way. I mean, that's why
Yeah,
there's alcohol in my house still. You know, it's just like, I don't,
yeah,
it's fine.
yeah. That's no. People have their opinions. That's fascinating. Well, tell me how did you? Because I know that's something a lot of people fear, right? Either their spouse or their dating or their friends, like it's going to change. Like, how did you handle that with friendships changing? Like, what was kind of how did you handle that when that came up?
I mean, my feelings are hurt, you know, obviously. I
Yeah.
didn't know that I didn't know that that particular group of friends was transactional around drinking.
Mm,
I
yeah.
had no, I mean, I thought that we all really genuinely cared for one another. I didn't know
Yeah.
that not having a glass of wine in my hand was going to change that, you know. And I
Mhm.
think if they, in all fairness to them, I think if they were on this podcast with us right now, they would say, Holly, that's not true. We love her. And I know to some degree that's true, but it's
Mhm.
conditional love. It's, you know,
Yeah.
because if I started drinking again, I would be able to go out with them this Friday night. Um,
Yeah.
so I've just had to pivot, you know, and, you
Mhm.
know, I'm 58 years old. It's not, making friends at 58 is not, it's not easy, but it's also not hard either.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I've joined some meetup groups and, you know, I'm getting ready to join. I'm getting ready to pick up, even though I really can't believe that these words are coming out of my mouth. I'm going to start playing pickleball and, which is a sin to tennis players, which I also
I
am.
know you're a fellow tennis player. We have to talk about that. I know. I'm like, I'm not doing it yet, but it's a fun sport too. You can play both.
Yeah, I can play both. But you know, they just opened a new club here. And so I'm just going to go
Oh
pick
my.
up pickleball and, you know, start over. It's all about starting over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know as much as I do that it's not about you, right? Like
No,
somebody who's confident in their drinking or not drinking doesn't care what you do. So
right.
that's something but that's hard when we are going through a big change and we are feeling a little vulnerable and we're all still figuring out this new norm and our friendships change. But I think if somebody's listening, really start to identify like, okay, is that really about me or is that
Right.
about them? And it can still hurt, right? Those can both be true. You
Yeah.
can know. I'm curious, you admit this kind of starting out with this. Do you now that you're into sobriety, do you view yourself as somebody who had a dependency? Do you view yourself as a former alcoholic? Do you have any identification with the Allyson who was drinking back a year ago?
I know that she's not an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I went years without drinking.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm not saying like no alcohol at all, but I mean like Christmas Day or New Year's Eve or things
Right. Yeah.
on, you know, I only drank on like special occasions, like maybe my birthday or something,
Mm-hmm.
for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So I don't, I don't label her as an alcoholic. I think if I had to put some kind of label on her, um, I would label her, an avoider.
Mm,
She was just
yeah.
avoiding. She was avoiding the
Mhm.
inevitable, sobbing that needed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it right there. Thank you for sharing that. That's something I've kind of struggled with. I'm like, I don't think I was dependent. I don't think I was an alcoholic, but I don't know what that core was, and maybe that's something for me to explore too, because I don't know that. And again, labels don't matter. I'm always just kind of curious with hindsight
Yeah, and I
what
mean,
that looks like.
I just had my, behind the power event, and somebody was asking me at the very end of it, you know, do you want a glass of champagne? And I was like, no, I really don't. I'm good. And
Mhm.
they were like, well, are you ever going to drink again? You
Yeah.
know, and I was like, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Mm.
I think it's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to just be like, I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to drink again. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if I am or not, but I'm not drinking today. And I don't think I'm going to drink tomorrow.
Yeah.
But, I don't think that, and I say I don't know because I'm not the same person anymore. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
afraid to sob. I'm not afraid to feel those feelings
Yeah.
anymore. I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
confront all of that. So, but I also know that my reason for drinking, because I mean, when I say I drink on special occasions, it's because I was around family and there's a whole thing for me. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, my reasons for drinking were never what I thought they were.
Mm. That's good right there. Like the celebration, but it was with family. You're like, so it wasn't really celebration. It was more of the people that were like, it was like too conflicting. That's, yeah. Well, I love you said that too. You're like, this version of Allyson may decide she wants to have a glass of wine every once in a while. And that's fine
Right.
too. And that's why I started Sober Chef Rising, right? Like, how do we get some freedom, but also some intention in our drinking? Because I was quitting forever. I was like, I can't commit to that. That seems like a lot.
Yeah.
It seems very overwhelming to be like, I'm not going to do something for the rest of my life. Like that seems very overwhelming. Well, I've got two questions to finish on. I could talk to you for hours, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having
First
me.
of all, if somebody was listening and they were kind of in your spot of, I think I could be drinking more than I want to be drinking, what's like one or two bits of advice you would give them?
If they said I'm drinking more than I want to be drinking,
Yeah, I'm drinking more and maybe I should be doing something differently.
man, that is a question that I asked myself a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I would say to them is if you're having to think about it, then there's something deeper going on.
Mm-hmm.
No one has to think about a glass of wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a glass of wine, you go home, you're fine. You can even drink, or you can even drive after a glass of wine, right? Like a real glass of wine, which is 4 ounces or 6 ounces, right? Not our 12. So, I mean, if someone came to me and said that, I would say to them, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling when you pour that third glass of wine?
Yeah.
Because there's something going on. There's something going on.
Yeah. It's not about the wine.
It's never about the wine.
It's never about the wine. Unfortunately, we're like, there's something under there. And I'd love to know, what does soberish mean to you?
I was thinking about that actually earlier today because I was coming on here.
Yeah.
To me, it's no pressure. I think we live in boxes, and when you put ish, it just takes one of the sides of the boxes down. So, it's like tomorrow, if I go to someone's house and they offer me a glass of wine and I decide to drink it, and then I start all over again and I have another year of sobriety under my belt, then I'm sober-ish. But I haven't ruined my life. I haven't ruined my lives. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It gives that little bit of flexibility in that.
Exactly.
Freedom. Yeah.
Allyson,
thank you so much for coming on. I will put in the notes how to get a hold of you. I know you do a lot of great work in the mindset space and with unapologetic power, so I'll put that in there. And thank you so much for sharing your sober story with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for tuning in. Please leave us a review, share with a friend, and remember, everything you want is on the other side of saying no to that drink. Have a good day.